Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So today, what I'll be discussing is supply chain resilience. You've heard a lot of speakers discussing about resilience across your attack surface, across different aspects of your security. But today, it's about your suppliers, your vendors, your partners. So as we all know that as we work together with different organizations, we have this interconnectedness across the board. But one cyber incident, as we just saw very recently, affecting just one vendor can bring your entire operations down to a halt, right? So that's not great. And the challenge here is how do you bounce back, right? A lot of speakers have discussed what resilience means, right? It's ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover. The most important part of that is recovery, right? How quickly can you bounce back from that? So at the heart of this supply chain resilience, what I want to consider is, of course, KYC. Most of you will probably know what this means. It's not know your customer. Instead, it's know your supply chain, KYSC, right? So knowing your supply chain doesn't mean just having visibility about them, right? It's across all the board, across the entire ecosystem of not just your partners, suppliers, and vendors as well. So if we look across just the last two incidents as well, the big ones, of course, we saw CrowdStrike, right? When they went down, it affected the kernel level, about 8.5 million devices were all affected. Went down, airports, governments, police force, emergency went down. And even though it wasn't a traditional cyber attack, it was a cyber company that caused this breach, this downtime as well. So it's more about the availability issue around this. On the other side, you see Snowflake, right? Snowflake itself wasn't breached. There was info stealers that stole credentials from Snowflake employees. Unfortunately, that caused a couple of companies to have a data breach in their environment. So how do I know my supply chain, right? And if you think about it, it's across your entire organization. It's not just your technology vendors, right? Because within your organization itself, you will have different business units, right? You would have legal teams, you would have sales team, they might be using Salesforce, legal might be using an outsourced partner, right, for the legal contract reviews. You might have HR, right, looking for talent reviews across the board as well. So that's your vendor ecosystem, right? And those are the people that you work with. They have information. And one more step further down the road, so this is your third party, as we call it. One more step further down the road is the fourth party, right? When we look at the fourth party, you want to consider the concentration risk, right? How many common fourth parties do I have across my third parties? How many vendors do they share, right? And in the past, we saw a fourth party causing issues. For example, AWS. AWS goes down for 30 minutes, half the internet goes down. So when we look across the board, what you want to consider is who are not just your technology providers, as well as all your partners. So interestingly, 90% of technology products and services are made of just 150 companies. And this is based on what we can detect publicly. So these are partners that have direct network access into your environments. You have vendors that have API access, right? And or they may be running your systems as well. So what sort of access do they have? What sort of data do they have access to? How do they get access is critical to think about. So if you think about the supply chain challenges, I call it the middle child syndrome, right? So it's usually having the least resource as well as the least attention, right? Everyone cares about protecting your perimeter, protecting where your data is. But remember, your data is also with your suppliers and your partners as well. So you have to also mind how they are protecting your data. The challenge with that as well is that there's also a lack of cross-functionality visibility, right? We do incident response at Security Scorecard, and when we had incidents as well, it's surprising how little a leader of another business unit knows what vendors or what systems or what business even that another leader does in the whole entire business. So the challenge here is that the InfoSec team or the IT team may not have visibility across all vendor ecosystems within your organization, right? So don't rely on just the InfoSec team to carry the load. So at the same time, going even further into the nth party is crucial but it's also very challenging. How do you go further and how do you investigate all of that is a big question mark as well. So when you think about it, what you really want to know is it's about the businesses that you do business with and how they're working with you, right? The nuanced approach to it. So with all of the AI technologies coming in, there's something else to consider. Is my vendor using my data to train their AI, right? So Adobe is doing it, right? So there was a big legal contract around it, right, where Adobe changed the user around it. So these are all things to consider across your vendor ecosystem. So when we think about how you can start, it's simple. Who are my vendors, right? Who are my vendors? What do they do? What access do they have? What do they do for me, right, as an organization? Next, think about the what if, right? What if this vendor goes down? What type of data, information, or operations will they stop in terms of my business, right? And what type of access of data do they have? What happens if my vendor gets a breach, right? Will I get a breach because my vendors had a breach? Next, think about who are the critical vendors among that list, right? Based on all the what if, think about who the VIPs are, which vendors are most critical to you, who handles the sensitive data, are there single points of failure? For example, CrowdStrike, right? CrowdStrike was a single point of failure. So following that, if you think about it across the board, you want early warning signals, right? Because you want to have a continuous visibility into this. Security Scorecard provides that. Come to speak with us at our booth, right? And think about how you can then have this visibility across the board from an automatic lens, right? How do I know who are my new vendors, right? Does your team have to tell you that? Or do you have a system in place to automatically discover all of that? Think about it from an instant response as well, right? What happens if my vendor goes down? Do I know what to do? Do I know who to call? Do I have a system in place to figure it out? Do I have a playbook, basically, my instant response playbook around having an understanding who my vendors are and who are involved in that response as well? Practice that playbook, right? Having a plan in just a folder is useless, right? Practice it. There's always gaps in the playbook that we see, right? We've worked with a fair bit of companies to run tabletop exercises, and we always see gaps in playbooks, right? Practice it. So it's not wrong to have a vendor sit down across a table, especially a critical vendor, and elaborate and understand what happens if the vendor gets ransomware. What happens to your data? What's the next step towards the recovery process around it? So don't be shy in engaging your vendors around it. Last but not least, engage your stakeholders, right? Make sure your bosses understand the challenges behind supply chain risks. Why do they possess operational needs to your organization, and help them understand the big picture, not the fine print towards your organization around supply chain risk. Of course, as you evolve your supply chain resilience, you'll go from pen and paper to Excel spreadsheets, all the way upwards towards an automatic approach towards engaging your vendors as well. Last but not least, you will have not just a detection capability, but also a response capability. And that's where your instant response playbooks, your engagements with your vendors come into play, right? You can also use a third party to help you with all of this as well, right? So Security Scorecard has a MAX program, Managed Security, for your third party supply chain as well. So last but not least, just as a quick conclusion around this, there are 4 points right here. First and foremost, this is not a one-time effort, right? It has to be a continuous effort. It has to be cross-functional. You can't be, let's do a meeting tomorrow and figure this out, right? It has to be everyone in the same room, understand who the vendors are, what data do they have access to, what happens if we want to move forward with this. Next, think about how this will affect your business operations. Because supply chain risk is not just a cybersecurity problem, it's not just a business operations problem, but it's part of your strategy, right? How do I respond to this? How do I protect my organizations around it? Start today, right? If you don't have a supply chain plan for your organization today, start today, figure out who your vendors are, especially the critical vendors, and how they affect you. Last but not least, build that incident response playbook, use it, and work with your vendors to be able to play this out and understand how this will operate in your organization so that you're not building the playbook while an incident is happening. With that, thank you very much and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there we go. Han Yang Lao. Okay, so basically know your vendors. What if your vendors have a breach? Create a VIP list. Okay, there, you can see his takeaway up on the screen.
Cyberspace, the ultimate business frontier, where the sky's the limit for growth and vulnerabilities. Like AI-enhanced threat actors planning devastating attacks. But not on Security Scorecard's watch. With a complete view of the attack surface and supply chain, Security Scorecard identifies and resolves risks, keeping companies ahead of any threat. Powering supply chain cyber risk management to the max. And combining the Galaxy's best platform, threat intel, and expertise to fortify the entire business ecosystem. So, to any company out there navigating its cyber odyssey, chart a course for confidence with Security Scorecard.